Hello, Web 210. So here we are, we're about to get started on Chapter 6, talking about typefaces and the web. So I gave you a brief overview with the last video. Now we're going to get started on choosing typefaces for your web page. So the property that one uses is font family. You've seen us use this a couple of times. You might be wondering why we don't just choose font. Well, remember what I mentioned in the last video about font actually being sort of an amalgamation of a variety of different characteristics? That's why. When all we're doing is choosing the typeface, we use the property of font family. If we use just plain old font and don't indicate at the very, very least, a font size and a font family, then it doesn't work at all. So we're going to create a rule wherein we will define a generic sort of font family, and let's talk about the different pieces of what we're doing here. So we're going to start off by just typing font family, and I'm going to say as my font family Verdana. Now Verdana is a sans serif font, and that means it's got kind of those rounded edges that you see on a lot of websites. They have traditionally been used for web text for years and years and years because they tend to be pretty easy to read on a screen. Now, here's the thing. Not everybody's going to have Verdana installed on their computer. And the idea is that you want to create what's sometimes called a font stack in order to provide fallback fonts for people. That is to say, if I choose a typeface and not everybody's got it on their computer, this gives me some options. So I'm going to say Verdana, and I'm going to then say Arial, because Arial is one of those typefaces that pretty much everybody has on their computer. And we're going to say, just on the off chance somebody's looking at this on one of those funky text-based browsers, Lynx or something like that, we're going to give a generic typeface. And what that will do is that will look at the user's browser and it will substitute the default sans serif typeface for whatever typefaces they don't have. So, first of all, when a person is viewing the website, it will look on their computer to see if they have Verdana. It will then see if they have Arial, assuming they do not. And if they don't have either, it will just substitute whatever generic sans serif typeface it can come up with. So let's take a look at what that ends up looking like on our web page. As you can see, by default, the browser formats our text using a serif font, most specifically Times New Roman. And when I refresh, you can now see that it is a sans serif font. Great, so we were able to make that change, no problem. And that's great so long as the only typeface you want to use is sort of your boring run-of-the-mill standard typeface. These are what are called common fonts, and if you look in the book, you'll notice they talk about a lot of the common ones. Arial, Helvetica, Times New Roman, Times, Georgia, Baskerville, Palatino Linotype, Garamond. Those are sort of your standard serif fonts. We've got standard sans serif, monospace, and additional fonts to consider. But what if none of the typefaces you want to use are the sort that are generally found on anybody's computer? You want something that's got a little bit more pizzazz, a little bit more pop, that's still easy to read, or that's maybe kind of whimsical and fun, but that people aren't likely to have on their computers, but you want to guarantee that as many people running modern browsers as possible can view them. This is where web fonts come in. There are two different ways of implementing web fonts on your computer. One way is to actually upload the fonts in question to your website, and then to use CSS to point to those fonts, and then call to them in any of the rules you create. Another way is by using technology like Google Fonts. Google hosts a variety of fonts on its server, and using code that Google provides you with, you can actually point to Google servers and use the fonts in your projects. So we're going to take a quick look at both of those techniques. With your font file types, if you look on page 133 in your book, it'll list a couple different font types. Here's the thing, you need all of them. If you don't have every single solitary one of those typeface types represented when you save the files to your website, what you're going to find is that certain browsers will not display the web fonts, and that's because each of those different file types adheres to the rules put forth by a particular browser. Chances are, if you've got modern versions of all browsers, you're probably okay, but if you become concerned about what is this going to look like in IE7 or 8 or whatever, it becomes a bigger issue. Things to keep in mind: not every font is eligible for use on the web. Vogue really would prefer that you not use Dido everywhere. So they're going to have some really specific rules. Not only that, the people who create the fonts are concerned about people being able to find those typefaces sitting on the hard drive of your server and being able to download them and use them for free. That's a really big deal when you've got typefaces that can cost upwards of hundreds of dollars. So there are lots of different resources given to you in the book. I'm going to show you one of the simplest ways to get a web font. There's this website I love. It's called Font Squirrel, and it's kind of a silly name, but it's really easy to remember. Font Squirrel is a place you can go to just download even just free typefaces to have on your computer. They're generally speaking fairly good quality typefaces and really easy to use. I'm just going to sort of browse through here, and I want to try to find a typeface that is so obviously different than what we've already got. I think I'll look at this Sophia Pro. I'm going to click on this. And let's take a look. You'll notice that when I click on the typeface, one of the things it gives me is a web font kit. And you click on the web font kit. You can take a look at what your options are. And as you can see, you're not actually able to download a web font kit for that particular typeface. So we're not going to circumvent that at this point. We don't really have a whole lot of time. I'm going to look at see if I can find myself a typeface that's going to allow that just sort of naturally. This one does. This is Cantarell. You can tell it does because we've got these icons down here indicating that it's available in that way. So I'm going to click on the typeface. I'm going to go to the web font kit, and you can see down here that it shows you. So you can choose your font format. You're going to want to choose all four. You can choose any subsets. Generally speaking, I just leave it as it is, and you can download what it says, the @FontFace kit. So we're going to click on OK. It has downloaded the file. So your next step is to extract all your files. And what's great about Font Squirrel is it provides you with these directions that are built right into the folder that you download, as well as a folder with your font, with your web fonts and all of the information within them. I really am only interested in the regular, and so when I open it up, I can see that I've got all of this exciting stuff. So here's what I'm going to do: is I'm going to grab all of these, and I'm going to copy them. And then I'm going to go into my Chapter 6 demo files folder. And generally what we would do here is we would create a new folder and name it something like fonts or typefaces. And I'm just going to stick them in here. So there we are. We've got our typefaces. Excellent. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to we want to go back to here, and we want to take a look at the style sheet. So I'm going to open this up in Notepad++. And what we find in the style sheet is a little bit of information about how to format, what the syntax is for including this web font. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this. And generally speaking, when we have web font information, we make it the very first information in a style sheet. That's really going to be kind of key. The next thing is to take a look at what the font family is, and I'm going to just copy this for right now. I'm also going to have to come here to the URL, and we're going to have to alter it because this is not where these files are located. The CSS is in the root directory, and the fonts themselves are in a folder called fonts. So I'm going to have to make certain to edit the URL appropriately so that it's got the proper path. And what I'm going to do here is just insert it. So let's take a look at our web page. So you can see here we are with Verdana, and when we refresh it with the new typeface, there we go. There's our web font. So hopefully that makes that a little bit easier to understand. The other way of working with web fonts is with Google Web Fonts. And you can get there by going to google.com/fonts. And you can see that in our Google Web Fonts, we've got all these groovy typefaces. I'm going to just choose one of the first ones I find. I'm going to choose this Artifica that we've got here. And generally speaking, when you find a typeface you want to use in Google Fonts, you just click on Quick Use. It'll bring you down here. Sometimes you will see an image that will show you the impact on page load time. You can talk about all of the different character sets you want. And you can copy and paste this link to the CSS, or you can include this import at the beginning of your CSS, and that's what I'm going to do. And the reason I tend to prefer doing it this way is because otherwise you have to put that link to the CSS in every single solitary HTML page you create, whereas all of your HTML pages in theory already have a link to your CSS file. So you can change the typefaces a little bit more easily. You can add additional ones. I just find it to be a more streamlined way of accomplishing the task at hand. So there you go. There's the import. And let's go back to Google Fonts. That's step one. You create the link. And then this shows you the text that you need to put into your CSS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the headings and I'm going to give them that font family of Artifica. And I'm going to come over here to my typography. You can see that all of the headings are the sort of web font that we used before. Alright, so we get here and realize that the typeface that we have looks like it's pretty much just Times New Roman. So let's determine what the problem is. Source order is really important, and I'm going to try moving that import to the very, very top. And generally speaking, anytime you're going to want to import any CSS, if you're using the @import declaration, you're almost always going to want it to be at the very, very top of a page. So let's take a look at this document now that we have done that, and you'll see that it now has the proper typeface. So hopefully this will have provided you with sort of a nice down and dirty quickie version of how to work with CSS and typefaces. We've had the opportunity to kind of go over how to use a common one, as well as how to use Google Fonts for creating web fonts, and using Font Squirrel as well as other services for downloading the different file formats one would need in order to have a font be able to be usable on the web. Thanks. We'll move on to other characteristics of text in the next video.